Hello. So today we're going to be going over how to create a custom report for any multi-activity protocol in the MR software. So we are going to cover how to create that protocol as well as record it as well. But to just introduce the whole concept here with showing the end result first, we are going to be using a well-known clinical assessment, the balance error scoring system, to create a template here and create our multi-activity protocol. So this is sort of the end result we are going for. This is for that best test. And the best test has multiple different components. It is a balance test. So it does involve bilateral standing activity, bilateral standing with foam, left leg balance, left leg with foam, right leg balance, and right leg with foam, as well as a tandem stance assessment here. So you'll notice that we have different sections in this report for all of the different activities that have different locations for those elements, and basically every single section of this report has a place for that activity. So again, just introducing this as sort of the beginning here, I wanted to show the end results first so that we could have some kind of goal to work towards as we go through this process together. So starting all the way back in the home screen here, I am going to go to a activity protocol for the best test. So I had generated that protocol under my mobility assessments activity or application, and my mobility protocol for the best test is right here. So let's go ahead and just go to the configuration to view how that is set up. So if I go into the recording options, you'll see that I have chosen this multi-activity with screen commands option. And that multi-activity with screen commands has multiple activities in it: bilateral with foam, single leg firm, tandem stance firm, bilateral foam, single leg foam, and tandem stance foam. So I have pre-configured all of these activities to have a single recording phase. So if I click through here, you'll see they all have one recording phase, and that recording phase lasts for 20 seconds. We have a forward progress bar with a prompt and a sound. The prompt basically showing us what needs to be performed for that activity and will be displayed on the screen, as well as a sound that signifies the beginning of that activity. And then you'll notice that each of these recording phases for 20 seconds has a prepare phase, which is a non-recorded phase that gives you time to prepare the subject for the next activity here. So creating these activities in the recording options, again, is quite simple. You just need to be in this multi-activity of screen commands. You can always create new activities, rename that activity. So if I wanted to have another activity here for some other sort of balance activity, I could type that in, tandem foam again, for instance, and I could type in the prompt, stand in tandem stance. I could put in a sound from the sounds object file here, or even add a new sound if you had a specific sound you wanted to use. And I can specify that duration as well as any preparatory phases I wanted to include. If you didn't want to have a preparatory phase that was a non-recorded part of that recording, then you could simply uncheck this box and the software would instead go straight from activity to activity. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this one because I don't care to include it in my protocol, but just to show you how that protocol is built so that it gives some context to the specific recording we're working off of today. So if I then go to the database tab here and open up the recording that goes with this protocol, a couple of different things are happening here, right? We could see the different activities outlined on the timeline that are approximately or exactly 20 seconds long each. You can play the data back. Not too much exciting going on here because it's just kind of a standing balance test. But we do have several things going on with this multi-activity, multi-device recording. We have the force data coming through from these force plates and center of pressure platform. We have some 3D motion capture on the lower body, and we also have some EMG recording the muscle activation patterns on the gluteus medius and vastus medialis during this recording here. So let's say I want to create a report, and just because I have created that report before, I can reopen it in MR4 simply by going to the report or select report area. But let's say I want to create a brand new report from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to new. You can decide which group you want this to be in, so maybe custom reports. You can even type in a desired name of the group here if you wanted to type in a new name. So if you wanted to create an entirely new tab or category called balance tests, you could absolutely do that. And you could add a name, so for instance, best test, as well as a description. This report is for the best test. Instructions for generating the report can go here. So lots of cool stuff you can do, including, browse for a different image to use instead of this general icon, or paste an image, for instance. When you are done creating your report, you can mark it as read only, so you can eliminate the possibility of someone else doing any edits. But before moving forward here for our blank report, we do need to choose a report class. I won't go into gross detail on the report class categories here, but basically this is telling the software how you want to define the intervals or analysis intervals going into the report. So either we want to look at the whole record or a specific selection using a mouse click. We want to do a point of interest report. Maybe we want to do 1-phase periods or 2-phase periods. This would be if you had, multiple repetitions or multiple, separate activities. Not quite like this, but more like a repetitive motion. Bilateral analysis, jump analysis, baseball pitching. So we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty on all of the different specific automated reports that we have available. But for this case, I do want to just work with that selection and full record and click OK. And I can move to my blank report. So first of all, let's go ahead and review what a report element is. Now, a report element is part of your report that has data in it. And you'll notice that if I click around the report area, anything that I click on that gets highlighted with a dotted box can be seen as a separate element. And that element can be edited by double-clicking. So if I double-click on the record data here, I can go ahead and specify specific data I wanted to include in the report by unchecking these boxes. And of course, each element will have separate settings. If I wanted to go ahead and change this image, I can do that as well by browsing for a new image on my computer or pasting it from my clipboard. I won't really change any of the information here up at the top, but I do want to just change the name of this report from Neuraxon report to best test. And you could do things like change the color, font, alignment, etc. with any text box here. So now I want to create my first element. So this report, I want to have that center of pressure data. Maybe I also want to have some idea of what the muscle activation patterns were on specific muscle groups. So I'll keep that in mind as I go ahead and add different elements to my report here. So I'll double click to insert an element, and I will go into my specific analysis, which is where you find most of those application-based parameters. And I want to go ahead and add a stance diagram. And then here within the settings for the stance diagram, I can do things like adjust the size. But what I can mainly do here is specify an activity restriction. So I'll go ahead and specify that activity restriction. I could either do the maximum or average pressure print, which actually is not relevant to this particular record because it's a force plate record, so all we have is a center of pressure information. If we had a pressure platform which had pressure cells in it, then we would be able to actually capture like a maximum pressure print area. So I'll keep all those settings the same and just click OK. So now we have a center of pressure element for that bilateral standing activity. So let's say I want to add a little bit more, right? So I want to add another element, so I could just simply go down the list, double click to insert an element, and let's say now I want to plot the channel curves for my EMG data. So let's go ahead and again restrict my calculations to the bilateral activity. And let's also restrict the calculations to specific channels. In this case, I am just going to go type EMG, but I'm going to go a step further to reduce this selection result down here just to the gluteus medius. There are other things you can do here, like specify specific statistics you want to create, as well as output options. So you can decide how you want that information represented. I am just going to go ahead and just plot the signal. So now we have that left versus right gluteus medius data coming in for that bilateral channel curves element. So now you're thinking, like, it's great that we can plot these things, but how do I know what they are? There's no labels at all. So that's where labeling elements can come in. And you'll notice I am just haphazardly kind of adding elements to my report for now. There is a reason for this, and it's because you can always reorganize and shuffle things around later by moving elements around using the shelf, so I will get to that shortly. But let's go ahead and just go back to our element selection menu, and we'll go to the layout and decorations next. So if I want to label all of those elements, what I can do is I can create a box. So I am just going to label this box bilateral because I want to specify the bilateral activity. I'm going to go ahead and just change the font size here, make it a little bigger, go for 16. I can also change this color. Let's go ahead and just make it this, blue color, similar to the header there, and click OK. So now I've created this box with a title, and I can either double click inside of the box to put a new element there, or actually what I want to do is add one of these elements that I've already created to that box. So now we get to use the shelf. So remember when we talked about any element you could click on using a dotted box, it gets highlighted here. You can click on that element and drag it onto the shelf. Now it's no longer in my report, it's just on the shelf. So now if I wanted to go back into the report, I can click and drag from the shelf into an interval that I want to place it, and the area that that element will be placed is signified by this orange line. But if I wanted to go inside the box, I can drop it inside the box here. It'll just get highlighted in orange. And let's say I also want to put this element inside of that box as well. So I can grab that onto the shelf and I can try to put that in the box, but you'll notice it can't actually go in the box. It has to go either above or below it. So this will help introduce us to another element called a sheet, which will allow us to place multiple elements inside of a box or into a splitter area. So I'm going to go ahead and just move this back out onto the shelf, and I'm going to add another sheet element inside of my box. So if I go to my layout and decorations again, I can pick sheet. That'll allow us to create a column of report elements into a box or a splitter. So now I can do something like include my stance diagram and include my channel curves diagram all inside of that box. But now, this is taking up a little bit too much space, and I want to add a picture. I want to add, a bunch more stuff and make this a little bit more compact. So now we can think about adding a splitter, for instance. So I can again double click inside this box and I can say I do want to add a splitter inside of this box that splits everything left, right, 50-50. So now I can go ahead, drag these inside of the box, look for this orange outline here, and now I have both of these elements split. So now I get some good information here. This is a little bit more compact. Starting to really like this layout. If you do want to add more elements inside of that splitter area, you can just add more splitters. So for instance, I will go ahead and just delete this splitter, just right click, delete. I can double click, and then if I want to break it up into thirds, usually what's easiest is start left, right, do like a 33.3% split, and then you could double click inside of the remaining area and add another splitter that splits the remaining section 50-50. So now we have 3 equal size portions within this box. So I could put in that stance diagram, and I could put in that channel curves diagram, and I have one more space here. I'm actually going to go ahead and include a picture. So I'll go into info and multimedia. This is where some of that date, time, subject info is. And I'm going to go ahead and add a video and basically just show a video at, let's say, 50% of each phase. And again, go to this activity restriction and say I want the bilateral. So a couple more things you can do here. You can overlay these so they are side by side. That'll take up a little less space. We can reduce the size of this box as well. You could even do things like add more elements for center of pressure parameters if those are interesting to you too. So going back to our specific analysis, if I scroll all the way down to stance parameters, again, activity restriction, I could specify basic or advanced stance parameters, and I could look at all of these intervals like analysis time, center of pressure path length, center of pressure average velocity, etc. So now I have something that is really comprehensive, but it does only exist for one activity. So anytime you are creating a multi-activity report, I oftentimes recommend getting everything you want for the first activity all ready and set to go, because it makes creating the rest of the report so fast, because you could actually simply copy this and just change all the activity restrictions. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that next. So we've already learned how we can move elements onto the shelf, drag them from the shelf back in just by clicking and dragging. If we want to make a copy of an element, the easiest thing to do is hold down the Control key on the keyboard and then drag onto the shelf. So now you'll notice that the shelf now contains this channel curves element, but it still exists in my report. I can delete things off the shelf too. I want to keep a clean space here, so I'm going to get rid of it. And you'll notice that you don't have to click and drag just single elements here, since now I have 4 elements. I can, if I click on the title of this box, copy this entire box onto the shelf. It's highlighted by this dotted box. So I can go ahead and hold down the Control key on my keyboard, click on the title, drag it over to the shelf, And now if I want to bring that copy over onto the shelf, I can either simply move it, or to maintain that copy on the shelf and just add the same one into the report, hold down that control key again. Didn't click the control key at the right time, so we'll have to change that. But now I can simply go in, double click, go back to all of the element settings here and change that activity restriction. So now I'm going to go into the activity restriction for all of these elements and simply change it to bilateral with foam. This one's in that analyzed signals and intervals. And then finally change the title to bilateral foam. And now you can really quickly, just keep making these copies and adding them into the report. So now I can say, okay, now I want to do my left side. So changing all those activities to left, 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 and finally left in the title. And I'll just go ahead and keep going here. Finish this left foam, tightening it first here, mixing it up a little bit, and then simply changing that activity restriction. So this is left with foam, this is left with foam, this is left with foam. And this is left with foam. Oh, already changed that. So dragging that copy onto the shelf, drag it back in here, held down control that time so it did maintain a copy on the shelf. Let's go tandem, change this to tandem, change my image to tandem, change my channel curves to tandem, and change my center of pressure parameters to tandem. And then last one here, we'll do a drag that into the next space, and this will be tandem foam. Tandem foam, tandem foam, tandem foam, and finally tandem foam. So you can do a whole bunch of other things with the reporting. I chose a couple of things to focus on, like that center of pressure data, as well as the muscle activation patterns on the gluteus medius throughout these single leg balance activities. But you can also add that motion data in. You could add more text boxes to log scores and things like that. But hopefully this gives you a good idea of the capabilities so far. The last step we'll do here is simply go back. We can go to layout, save as new, and say this is our best test with force and EMG. You can name it whatever you like and even change the picture. Click OK. Click OK again to save the report layout. And now you can actually access this template again and again for new recordings that you made with that multi-activity protocol. So you can go, back to the viewer, and then if you click report, it will go back to this report. If you end up in the full report selection menu, here in report menu, you'll actually find that report template available under, like we said, balance tests, I didn't have to save it as new. I could have just saved the original best test since that's what we went with. But just shows you how you can make like save as copies of your reports here as well. I do hope this tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to support@naraxon.com, and we'll be more than happy to assist you with your custom report creation.